When you think of dominating defenses in the NFL, most people instantly talk about the steel curtain of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Doomsday Defense in Dallas, or the Purple People Eaters in Minnesota. But it's hard to think of dominant defenses and not include the defenses of the Oakland Raiders. Their rough-and-tumble style defined 3 decades of defensive football. In the 1960s, it was men like Ben Davidson and Willie Brown who brought a hard-hat approach to playing defense. In the 1970s, names like Jack Tatum and Phil Villapiano terrorized opponents with bone-jarring, teeth-rattling impact. And in the 1980s, Ted Hendricks and Lester Hayes punished ball carriers, quarterbacks, and receivers. Intimidating, hard-hitting, and daring was the province of those who played defense in Oakland and made Raider defense one of the most feared in the game.
Before the Raiders were legends, they were a blueprint, etched not in finesse but in fire. Al Davis arrived in 1963 with a doctrine that would become gospel. Defense wasn't a reaction, it was a declaration. The Raiders would not wait for the offense to make a move. They would impose their will, one snap at a time.
Well, the defensive theory evolved early on in the 60s to, number one, pressure. Put pressure on the pocket. And I think that somewhere within the first 5 to 10 plays of the game, the other team's quarterback must go down. And he must go down hard. That alone sets a tempo for a game.
Ben Davidson was the first to embody that philosophy. He didn't merely play defensive end, he loomed. At 6 feet 8 inches, he towered over offensive tackles like a gargoyle perched on the edge of chaos. His frame was angular, his gait was deliberate, and his presence alone altered the rhythm of a game. Davidson didn't chase quarterbacks, he hunted them. His hits weren't always legal and were calculated psychological warfare. He made the pocket a place of dread, and his reputation spread faster than fire. Linemen braced for impact before the snap. Quarterbacks shortened their reads. Davidson didn't need to speak. His silhouette did the talking. Tom Keating was the counterpoint. Where Davidson was brute force, Keating was geometry. He lined up in a 4-point stance, coiled like a spring, and exploded into gaps with surgical precision. He understood leverage like a physicist and used it like a street fighter. Keating didn't just beat his man, he dismantled the structure of the play. He was the kind of tackle who made offensive coordinators rewrite their blocking schemes mid-week. His game was quiet, but his impact was seismic. Dan Connors stood in the middle like a sentinel. He wasn't flashy, but he was omnipresent. Connors read offenses like a detective reads a crime scene, every motion, every shift, every tell. He filled gaps before they opened, and when he arrived with malice. His tackles were bludgeonings designed to make painful statements. Connors didn't celebrate, he didn't posture. He just reset his stance and waited for the next snap. That kind of cold efficiency made him the heartbeat of the early Raider defense. By the end of the decade, the Raiders weren't just a team, they were a threat. They led the AFL in sacks, turnovers, and fear. The vertical game may have defined their offense, but the defense was the soul of the franchise. Fast, violent, unapologetic. The silver and black weren't just colors, they were a warning. The 1970s Raider defense became orchestrated chaos. As the NFL absorbed the AFL, the Raiders brought their outlaw brand with them into the new league, and under John Madden, the defense became a symphony of violence. It wasn't just about hits, it was about control, intimidation, and legacy. The brutality, the headhunting, and the sheer force of impact defined the defense for a decade. 6'7" Ted Hendricks exemplified the kind of pure, relentless nature the defense would employ during the decade, devouring ball carriers, quarterbacks, and game plans with a ferocity that sent shockwaves through the league, and forcing offensive coordinators to adjust their philosophies and keep reserve players ready to step in to play for the walking wounded. Willie Brown was the linchpin. His footwork was poetry, his instincts clairvoyant. Brown erased receivers like scrawlings on a chalkboard. He played with a quiet authority that made quarterbacks second-guess their reads before the ball was snapped. His technique was textbook and his timing supernatural. He didn't need to gamble. He knew what receivers were going to do, sometimes before they did. And when he broke on a route, the ball was his. He was the kind of corner who made offensive coordinators circle his name in red ink and pray. George Atkinson was the blade, prowling the middle of the field, lurking like a jungle cat waiting for prey. Lean, wiry, and mean, Atkinson played safety like he was settling scores. He didn't just hit, he struck. His angles were perfect, his closing speed lethal. Atkinson didn't wait for the ball to arrive. He arrived first. He turned the middle of the field into a minefield, and receivers learned quickly. If you crossed into his territory, you paid in full. He wasn't reckless. He was calculated. Every hit had purpose. Every collision had intent. His hook turned many receivers into casualties of a 60-minute war. Skip Dr. Death Thomas was the wild card. He didn't look like a technician, but he played like one possessed. His coverage was sticky, his tackling violent, and his swagger contagious. Thomas was cold, heartless, and played without thought of consequences to his hits. He was big for a cornerback and faster than most receivers. He was a mauler and played with a chip on his shoulder and a target on the backs of opposing receivers. His presence allowed the Raiders to press at the line and dictate tempo. He wasn't just a corner, he was a move. Jack Tatum was the unapologetic hammer in the secondary, the assassin. He owned the middle of the field and protected it with a ferocity never seen before. Tatum's hits were not only explosive, they were legendary. He was a predator, a hunter, and when he struck, the game paused. Tatum didn't celebrate, he didn't apologize. He just turned and walked away, leaving behind a trail of broken routes and broken wills. He redefined what it meant to play defense, and his shadow still lingers over the position. Phil Villapiano was the heartbeat. He played linebacker like a man possessed, fast, furious, and fearless. Villapiano didn't wait for the play to come to him. He attacked it. His reads were instant, his pursuit relentless. He could cover backs, blitz quarterbacks, and blow up screens before they developed. He was a vicious tackler, pouncing on his prey like a hungry tiger. He dished out licks that left bumps and bruises and left his victims dazed and confused. He was the kind of player who made offenses rethink their game plan after the first quarter. Monty Johnson didn't arrive in Oakland with fanfare. He arrived with purpose. Johnson's style was rooted in discipline and violence. He read offenses like a chess master, diagnosing formations and anticipating movement before the ball was snapped. He was the one who made sure the play ended where it was supposed to, on the ground in a pile with the ball going nowhere. He was a wall, square-shouldered, low pad level, and always arriving with bad intentions. He didn't just fill gaps, he closed them. Together, they formed a defense that forced the league to rethink how much violence it could allow. Raiders forced rule changes, redefined coverage schemes, and turned the middle of the field into a war zone. They were central to the blood feud with the Steelers, and their victory in Super Bowl XI was the culmination of a decade of dominance. The 1980s Raiders moved south, but their souls stayed black. In Los Angeles, the defense evolved. Their violent nature didn't change. It became sharper. They refined their brutality, combining physicality with elite technique, daring, and skill. The bone-jarring, tooth-rattling impact that had defined the defense the 2 previous decades was still there, but it was something more calculated and cunning, more cerebral. Howie Long was the new face of Fury. He wasn't just a defensive end, he was a new breed. He had linebacker quickness and a relentless motor. His hand fighting was elite, his leverage unmatched. He studied linemen like prey and exploited every weakness. He didn't just beat his man, he humiliated him. Long played with a kind of controlled rage that made every snap feel like a duel. His motor never stopped, and his impact was felt on every level of the field. Lyle Alzado was the perfect storm around which the Raiders' defense revolved. He played with the rage of a man that had been denied something personal. Strong, quick, and ill-tempered, Alzado had a street fighter's mentality and wreaked havoc on pass pockets and punished everyone in front of him whether they had the ball or not. His style was straight to the point, brutal, and often borderline illegal. He was the tone setter for the Raiders and was feared as much for his play as he was for his disposition. Alzado viewed football as a war. Cornerback Lester Hayes was a sticky menace. He turned his hands into fly traps with stickum. Known as the Judge, Hayes was a nightmare. He relentlessly jammed receivers at the line and bullied them through their routes. His stance was low, his eyes locked, and his hands unforgiving. Hayes erased receivers from pass plays like they were annoyances. In 1980, he recorded 13 interceptions and turned the cornerback position into law enforcement, exacting a stiff penalty for trespassing into his zone. He was a natural deterrent and became the man every quarterback wanted to avoid. His counterpart, Mike Haynes, was a defensive scalpel. Smooth, cerebral, and nearly impossible to beat deep, Haynes brought elegance to the brutality. He played with perfect technique, fluid hips, and an uncanny ability to mirror routes. Quarterbacks avoided him not out of fear, but out of futility. Haynes didn't need to intimidate, he just needed to exist. These two took away the Redskins' passing game and set the tone for the complete defensive dominance in Super Bowl XVIII. Art Monk and Charlie Brown found no refuge, and Washington's league-leading scoring machine had its gears jammed by Hayes and Haynes. Matt Millen was the enforcer. Built like a wrecking ball, Millen played linebacker with a joyful violence. He hit everything that moved and made sure it didn't move again. His reads were instinct and rage, his pursuit relentless, and his leadership undeniable. He was the kind of linebacker that relished open field collisions and reveled in their results. Rod Martin was a turnover-creating machine, always in the right place at the right time. Quiet, efficient, and deadly. In Super Bowl XV, he set a record with 3 interceptions, a record that still stands. Martin didn't chase glory, he chased the ball. His was a quiet fury that manifested in his brutally effective results on the field. His play was his bravado, and he relished driving a stake through the heart of his opponent. Safeties Van McElroy and Mike Davis patrolled the middle of the field and turned it into a fortress. They stole passes and punished receivers as keepers of the gate. In 1983, this unit put their magnificence on full display, dominating Washington in Super Bowl XVIII. They forced 5 turnovers, made quarterback Joe Theismann look as if he was seeing ghosts, and broke Washington's prized offense into shards and scored a touchdown, cementing their legacy as one of the greatest units in NFL history.